Last week it was Egypt. Today it's Syria, where the established order is staging a presidential election. There's precious little doubt of an overwhelming landslide in favor of Bashar al Assad. His supporters argue that even in a fair fight, where the whole of that war-torn country could cast ballots, he would still win. But with many revulsed by the hijacking of the revolution, they say, by foreign-backed Sunni radicals. Of course, the other side will contend that it was Assad that triggered that radicalization, with first intense repression, and then by even bombing his own people from the air. Now, after the Iranian-backed Hezbollah movement stepped in to tip the scales on the battlefield in favor of Assad, the West, Turkey, and the Gulf states are trying to rein in those Sunni radicals. 3 years on, what's the plan? What will today's election change? And what's left of the Arab Spring? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Assad's election. With us to talk about it from Sydney, Australia, Mimi Al-Laham. She's with the pro-Assad National Union of Syrian Students. Thank you for being with us. We want to thank from Limassol in Cyprus, Fahed Ibrahim Bacha of the Opposition Union of Syrian Democrats for being with us. Franco-Syrian photojournalist Amar Abed Rabo is with us. Nice to see you. And political scientist Julien Thoron, who teaches at the University of Versailles, just outside of Paris. Thank you for joining our conversation. The France 24 debate, where you can weigh in on Facebook and on Twitter. Our hashtag, F24debate. Let's begin, if you will, with a map. We can perhaps show you the areas under government control, areas held by the rebels, and those that are disputed zones. I don't know if it comes out very clearly, but the government areas is basically that corridor that stretches from Damascus north, and then another corridor that stretches out towards the Iraqi border. But a lot of the country no-go zones. The estimates vary. Julien Thoron, what's your guess in terms of? I've seen news agency wires that say maybe 40% of the country had access to ballot boxes today.
Well, the point is to guess actually who will vote today. There's 6.5 million of internally displaced persons, 3 million of refugees. The people who, under the regime rule, are actually kind of forced to vote if it's not under direct threat, I mean under global propaganda. So 40%, I don't know. Actually, nobody can say it because there's no independent agency who are able to state it.
That are able to state it. Amar Abed Rabo, polling extended until midnight because of high turnout. We had our correspondent. It was very interesting because we had one correspondent on the Lebanese border telling us of people going to vote, then coming back and enthusiastically talking about the ballot boxes being full. We had another correspondent on the Turkish border, not too far from Aleppo, saying nobody crossed over, and people actually saying the election was a joke. Syria more divided than ever.
Syria is divided, definitely, but the best word is joke. It's not an election. This is a joke. I mean, it's the whole thing is a joke. I mean, saying Bashar has opponents is a joke. One of the opponents says Bashar is the greatest leader Syria has ever known, or something like that. That's another joke. The people to control if everything is going right, the observers, are from North Korea and from Russia and from Iran. That's one of the joke. I mean, it's so saying that now they're extending the time of the votes. That's another joke. We would love to laugh, you know, with Bashar al Assad, with all these things, but unfortunately we don't have to forget that these are blood elections. There are 160,000 Syrians who died, and we're still counting. It didn't stop. These elections will not stop anything. It's a confirmation of the dictatorship, and it will continue, unfortunately.
All right. Reactions divided on Facebook and Twitter. On Twitter, one reaction: Middle Eastern elections are only considered democratic when a Western stooge is guaranteed to win. Further to Amar's point, Earlier, there was Hala Jaber, who unfortunately could not be with us, Sunday Times correspondent. She tweeted how Russian election observers got a hero's welcome at the airport, and they were even carried on the shoulders of those who came to greet them inside of the airport terminal. Let me turn to you, Fahed Ibrahim Bashar, and ask you, what do you make of this election? Why does it matter so much?
Well, I don't believe, first of all, that this election mattered at all.
It matters certainly to those organizing it.
It doesn't even matter for those organizers. They know very well that they are actually staging this elections. They know very well that they are illegitimate. They have, and what they are doing is just try to polish their crimes and present themselves to the world as the only party who can continue to rule Syria. Otherwise, it will be a civil war led by jihadists and things like that. It is really a very sad day in the Syrian history, and equally in the history of democracy and democrats over the world is today. It is ludicrous to conceive that anyone actually believed these elections to be legitimate. And quite frankly, the regime's effort to portray them as such is laughable. It is a complete farce in every way, shape, and form.
Let me ask Mimi Al-Laham to react to that.
Yeah, I think what's really laughable is the fact that for the last 3 years, the nations that have supported the insurgency, or otherwise known as the opposition, have carried the narratives that there's no one in Syria that actually wants Assad to stay in power. And as these elections have clearly shown, there's a large number of people in Syria, millions in fact, that do support Assad. What is laughable is the lies that we have been told all these years to support the US agenda in Syria. And the fact that we saw hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees voting in Lebanon has been extremely embarrassing for NATO. And they're trying to basically legitimize these elections in every way possible. For example, in the US, UK, and France, and Germany, these nations that supposedly support democracy in Syria, they do not allow Syrians to vote. So the question is, why are they so afraid of the turnout? The rebels themselves have been terrified of elections having a large turnout. They've bombed election rallies in Dar'a, and they've actually been shelling Damascus and Aleppo for the last day. They kidnapped an election delegate.
Please, Mimi,
say at point that the elections were not
please, you have to be, you can love Bashar, it's your right, but you have to be honest about facts. Who has been shelling Aleppo in the last days? It's the barrel of the person you love. You have to be honest about this. There was no rally bombed in Dar'a because there's been no rallies at all. No, this is an election without any gathering, without any rally, without any demonstration.
Mimi Al-Laham.
You're painting me as an Assad supporter. That you're lying on air. I am not an Assad supporter. I've never supported Assad.
I'm happy to know about that.
Assad supporter is a lie. Well, the fact that I support is my nation, and I support the security of my nation and the end to the conflict. And clearly the West doesn't want to see an end to the conflict. Any idea of stability in Syria and an end to terrorism is something they try to undermine.
All right, no end to the conflict, you say. The West doesn't want one. A lot of reactions coming in. We'll look more closely a little bit later on about Western reaction. But here's one comment from our friend Milad Jokar saying the main priority is to stop the bloodshed and Al-Qaeda more than Assad's fall. Is there a fair level of hypocrisy on the part of the West when they say they want the ouster of Bashar al Assad?
Well, the rise of the revolution happened when the civilian population asked for fair and democratic elections. That's why all started. Actually, the regime answered to the civilian population by triggering their guns to them. So they shot the people who asked those kind of democratic elections. all autocratic regimes used to actually organize some kind of elections. Even in North Korea, it's classic, it's normal. They try to legitimate their autocracy by a popular support. Actually, Hafez organized that, and then Bashar took the same. And while the international community says, well, actually, it can't be a fair democratic election if there's only one candidate, well, he organized one with two other candidates, which are actually members of the parliament, where members to be elected are kind of close to the power. So actually what we see is that it's a kind of like a democratic organization of the elections, but it's not. There's no free media in Syria. There's no security for the voters, and when I say that, I say also in the jihadi zones, jihadi controlled zones. There's no multiplicity of free candidates. There's no freedom of speech. So this election is not an election. I completely join you. And it's even less a re-election. He has never been elected before, and he will not be elected this time. He organized the show-up of the so-called popular legitimacy of his power.
Fayed Ibrahim Bashar, when you roll the clock back 3 years, when it all began, what could anything have been done differently so that perhaps we didn't get to this outcome where nearly half of the population is displaced?
Well, we should not go 3 years only ago. What we have to go until the 80s when the first revolution started in Aleppo and Hama. Although we don't agree on that kind of revolution, which was armed at that time, but it was the world has allowed Assad to destroy and kill 40,000 people and destroy Hama completely. Then now, 3 years ago, when the Syrians Syrian children started a kind of demand for democracy and freedom. It was not actually asking for anything more than the regime himself go into bringing more democracy, more freedom, more dignity to the Syrian people. The regime has been threatened and felt that he has the right to do what his father did in 30 years ago in Hama. And when we see that these the killers, Rafat al-Assad and others who did this in Hama, they are now living peacefully with his friends there in Europe and enjoying their life. So the Syrians, they only requested democracy, freedom, and dignity. I'm surprised from my peer, Mrs. From Australia, that she's talking about that she loves Syria and she wants the security for Syria. I wonder that if our terminology, our vocabulary is the same. I think we are reading in two different dictionaries. Our dictionary as opposition do know the definition as it is in the all dictionaries of the words. They have a regime, the Syrian regime has his own dictionary, his own vocabulary, that everything has its special meanings for tailored by the regime himself. So democracy for the regime is different from the democracy known over the world. Freedom doesn't know it at all. He doesn't know what the means of freedom. He doesn't know what means dignity at all. And such a regime cannot bring a new change. We never seen a dictatorship regime that was capable to bring a new change or create a new democracy in the history of the world.
Mimi Alaham?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's interesting that he compares Syrian democracy to the democracies in the rest of the world. When we look at the US democracy, for example, they've had a Bush and a Clinton in power for the last 30 years, and they're supposedly a beacon of democracy. So no democracy is perfect, but what is on offer as an alternative for Syria by the states that support the opposition is a man that nobody knows, Jarba, who has not been in the country for 20 years and is basically a Saudi puppet. So this is the alternative offered to Syria, rather than reforms that are occurring in the nation itself. And even the rebels themselves don't support this man, Ahmed Jarba. So why should we accept an imposed leader that the West wants, rather than a Syrian leader?
That is a problem, a divided opposition. Mimi touches a point there.
Yes, a divided opposition. We agree absolutely about this. I mean, it's like saying there is sun in the sky. That's not a problem. But does the Syrian people deserve to be totally forgotten by the whole world because their opposition is divided? This is a real question also. To go back to what have been said, there is a main problem in the whole thing. I mean, don't talk about elections, don't talk about democracy, don't talk about dictatorship. We talk about denial. Until today, 3 years after the beginning of the revolution, the Syrian regime, until this morning, does not recognize or does not accept the fact that there is a popular uprising, that there is a popular demand. They still talk about a conspiracy, they still talk about Qatar, about Saudi Arabia, about Obama, about CIA, about I don't know what.
Well, let me ask
but they just don't realize that just outside of Damascus, 5 miles outside of Damascus, Bashar al Assad cannot go because he cannot be acclaimed, he cannot be received, because there are people who just don't want him anymore.
Let me ask Mimi Allaham, when this all started, it was outrage over police brutality in the city of Daraa. What did you think at the time?
You know, before I answer that question, I just want to address one point, the fact that there was a denial on air about the fact that rebels did shell an election rally in Daraa. So on your question now, I thought that whatever was going to happen on the streets of Syria was going to be manipulated by the outside, the superpowers basically, to gain some kind of influence in the region, to minimize the power of Iran and to maximize the power of Israel. I knew that any kind of will for democracy was going to be exploited in the worst way possible, and that the West was going to support extremist groups to try to get a sort of Shia-Sunni war going, because obviously they need to have the Syrian people hate them. That's what I thought.
Mimi, if I can give you an advice, please stop thinking about an international thing of Shia and Sunni and West and East, etc. Think about the Syrian people. Think about the Syrian people who are being shelled every day. There are tens of people, of children, who are being killed every day. Think about them. Don't think about the international powers.
You care about the Syrian people. You pretend to care about the children. Really, the children are just something that you wave in front of the camera to support your political objectives. That's
what are my political objectives?
Political objectives to turn over the state, and in the rebels' case, to put an Islamic state into place.
I don't want to put an Islamic state. Sorry.
Right, we're gonna take a
yes.
we're gonna pick up on this discussion when we come back, and also look at just how the West is looking at Syria these days. When we come back, it's the France 24 debate.